think we jet off to India next, don't we? I think we've lost Ahmed.
For India now to the track and trace in India, Mr. Siddharth, the co-founders of AltiusHub. Mr. Siddharth, how are you? Please, you are invited to unmute yourself and start your session.
Absolutely. So first off, thanks Ahmed and Justin for inviting me to the webinar. Truly a great set of experts and industry folks here. I'm sure with all of these discussions, the community as a whole is a lot more richer. And delighted to talk about the regulations in India, as well as what it means for the Indian manufacturing landscape that exports to a large part of the world. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and share my screen.
Yes, please.
Just a moment. I'm facing a bit of technical issues. Right. Just wondering if I've shared the right
Yes,
screen. Or...
it is still you share your screen, but it's still black. There is no slides appear.
Just all right. Yeah. Well, what's a webinar without a few technical glitches? Here you go. I hope it's all visible now.
Yes, yes.
Got it. So great. I'm very happy to share with the broader community about what's happening in India, both from a regulatory point of view, as well as how manufacturers are reacting to the local regulations, as well as more broadly the global regulations. Right. So I'll just start off with a bit of history and background. Today, India supplies roughly 20% of the world's generic medicines. A phrase that gets often used is that we are the pharmacy of the world. It gets used with pride. But behind the title is a reality that doesn't get discussed enough in rooms like these. The Indian pharma ecosystem, particularly the contract manufacturing base, it's navigating one of the most complex multi-regulatory compliance environments on the planet. Today, I'll talk about two things. One is the local QR-based track and trace system, which is in practice today for the top 300 drugs. But more importantly, what it actually costs a CMO when it has to face not just India's rules, but also the world's. A bit of history, under the DGFT, in 2011, the track and trace regulations were introduced. It all started with barcoding requirements for tertiary, secondary, and eventually the primary packaging levels. Largely tertiary and secondary got done, but the primary level barcoding had a lot of challenges. Every year it started getting deferred until the final deadline in January 2025 hit. That's when some readjustment to the rules had happened. A lot of folks said, this is a reset, used a lot of other terms, but I think what we have today, works largely okay. On the domestic side, traceability shifted from DGFT to the Ministry of Health. That's when it became, a lot more serious. Since 2023, the local market is using QR codes under the GS1 standards for the mandated top 300 drug formulations. Largely, Schedule H, H1, and X drugs are brought under the QR code umbrella. Interestingly, all APIs, whether they're manufactured domestically or they're imported, also have to have a QR code. The direction of travel is largely clear. India is building a very, very robust, traceability ecosystem. And it's doing so, keeping all of the stakeholders, in the loop, be it the manufacturers, the distributors, dispensers, and and others. Now, moving on to the CMO's global compliance reality. There are a lot of markets that India supplies to. Not all markets are harmonized. The burden, is immense on the Indian CMOs. Now, the Indian CMO doesn't manufacture just for India. A typical mid-sized Indian CMO, it might be supplying to the US, EU, the Middle East, a lot of Africa, and many other geographies around the world. More than 50 countries around the world today either have regulations that are already mandated or are in various stages of being mandated. The most popular, we all know them. I don't have to get into the nitty-gritties of each of these regulations. I'm sure my other panelists would do that. But what I want to do really is, what does it mean for a CMO on the ground? What it means is that a single packaging line or a set of packaging lines may need to produce serialized products in different formats. They have different data sets, and they are reported to different national repositories and in different communication protocols. And I say this because we all know about Russia, Uzbek, and Kazakh, how they use crypto. On the ground, it means that the IT integration with multiple government protocols has to be perfect. Validation and change control is required every time a new market's requirements evolve. It also means that you have to train your packaging staff to handle all of these different changes. This compliance burden is not just theoretical, it's operational, it's daily, and it disproportionately falls on CMOs. A large branded manufacturer might have all the resources to do this, but a CMO generally struggles when they, just with complying with multiple markets, And then comes the commercial reality. Brand owners increasingly force CMOs to have a robust serialization capability. This is good in a way, but it also puts a lot of burden on the CMOs. And there are 4 structural gaps that exist. One, there's no harmonization. Every market interprets GS1 standards a little differently. The CMOs all cannot build once and deploy everywhere. The second, the aggregation problem. Most serialization mandates don't stop at an item level. They do require multiple levels of aggregation. Getting it wrong creates a lot of downstream effects. Third, the data ownership ambiguity. Who actually owns the data? The CMO or the brand owner, the one who generated it? Whenever there is a recall or when there is a regulatory query, when the market authority asks for traceability records, how does the entire supply chain react? What burden does it put on CMOs? This is a question that comes across very often. And finally, the fourth one, the talent and technology gaps. Now, many Indian CMOs, particularly the mid-sized ones, are running serialization on fragmented systems. Though this is changing rapidly, the need for a unified enterprise-level data management system that just handles all of the markets around the world, that's largely missing among the mid-sized companies. But we see it changing very, very fast. So it's all moving in the right direction. Now, I just want to cite one example very recently, what we had seen on the ground, and probably where the market will move. I can only predict. There was a very I would say largish pharma company based out of India, which was exporting to 50+ markets. They had 3 fragmented systems which were taking care of all the track and trace operations. And then they decided to go ahead and implement an enterprise-grade system, which also happened to be AI native. What they gained was a very big serialization efficiency gain, real-time visibility, a very, very short implementation time. Now, this is what technology can do and help a lot of manufacturers, just in complying with multiple regulations. Now, I'd like to close with what the path forward might be. One, there should be a regulatory dialogue, better management, better engagement between India and key import markets. There is a need to reduce interpretation gaps. I think communities like these are very useful in making that happen. There needs to be a harmonization investment, continued push at GS1 and WHO level, for common data standards and interoperability and verification. This is again happening, but needs to happen more. And finally, democratized access. Compliance infrastructure must serve, all sizes of, manufacturers, not just the big ones, but also the mid-sized and the smaller, pharma companies. So with that, I will end my session. I'm happy to take any questions. Over to you, Justin and Ahmed.
Mr. Siddharth, thank you very much for your session. It was very informative. It is very important to have track and trace in India because a large percentage of the track and trace vendors are Indian, so expect the track and trace in India. Justin, if you have a question, you can ask Mr. Siddharth because I have another question to him also. You are muted, Justin.
Apologies, as Sid said, what good is a webinar without some technical difficulties? So yeah, no, India is a huge market, right? I mean, how would you describe how India is able to, because you serve so many different markets, right? Not just in terms of the India regulations, but Europe, in America, especially are dependent on some of the services. How are you able to adapt? How is India able to adapt so quickly to serve so many multiple markets?
I would largely put that in two buckets. There's no dearth of production capacity. Second, there's no dearth of talent and IT systems and the companies that enable manufacturers to serve so many markets. I can already see a few of my colleagues from the same industry who help the Indian manufacturers comply with multiple market regulations. As a community, there's enough talent, there's enough resources that help CMOs serve multiple markets, but it's not without its pains. And with reduced pain, with more education, I think India can be a much better place, in terms of track and trace.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a question now. Just a second. Yes.
We have another question from
Yes. Yes. I think let's have Mr. Udit. You have a question?
Hi, Siddharth. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you rightly mentioned there are a few of us here on the call. Just a quick question about the 300 brand that you speak of. India being one of the largest population on the planet, we do not have regulations like others do. Why do you think we never felt the necessity, number one? Or when we felt it, why did we realize that probably it was not important and we shoved it? Number two, while brand 200 regulations is amazing because now it does not depend on data matrix, it depends on a QR code, which will go to a landing page, which engages a lot of consumers, increases consumer engagement and patient engagement, which is amazing. And there's huge things you can do with it. But why just limit it to a few drugs? Why not exploit it to generics? So, because, when you talk of the IT India, the innovative India, the tech-savvy India, the highest data consumer of the planet, every goddamn child has a smartphone here, right? Why not make it on all the medicines? Why not be more collective when it comes to patient safety? Why just limit it to just few brands?
A great question, Udit, and this is something that I think we've discussed in multiple forums. Why hasn't this happened more broadly? I think the intent from the regulator is definitely there to have track and trace regulations for all the drugs. However, because India is such a large country, the consumption is so high, and the number of stakeholders within the supply chain is also high. You have the CMOs, you have the dispensers, you have the pharmacy networks, and so on. Implementing something like this at such a scale also, always starts small. The intent has always been there. We see, at least in my personal opinion, the top 300 is just the first step. I think after a few years, we would be moving more towards a more comprehensive track and trace system, like how we see around the world. You and I've probably been in a few meetings with the government officials. I think the intent is definitely there, but to implement it in a country of 1.5 billion people, it probably would take a little longer than probably some other countries around the world.
Okay, very good. We have also another question from Najib. He is asking, as you know, there is a few pilot projects existing in terms of domestic pharma supply chain in India. So there is any such to bring out a kind of central verification router system and also kind of verification mandate in the point of dispense. I think he's talking about like Envo model.
Absolutely. I think there were a few discussions, especially with the central government, that wanted a system like this. A lot of ideas have been discussed. I think it's only a matter of a few years before such a system will come into place. We've seen that with other industries, especially finance and other places where a central system was put in place, deployed at scale. I definitely see it coming. Hopefully, maybe in the next 5 years.
Very good. Mr. Patrick, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, and thanks. Just a question, you mentioned the top 300 brands and the QR codes, right? I think what also needs to be highlighted are the issues that actually brought in, right? Now, I know this may not be the forum for this, but I think it's important. I mean, I think one of the colleagues, it's not been exploited enough, etc. It is being exploited, but by counterfeiters, right? So we need to be very mindful of what we do doesn't cause other issues.
No, absolutely, Patrick. So if I have to wear my hat of being, a technologist, so any technology that you create on this planet, if there's somebody smart enough, they will try and break it. It's a race between us and the counterfeiters to stay ahead of each other. So I think QR code does have its problems. No technology is perfect, but at least it's a step in the right direction. I think the next phase of regulations will be a lot more tighter. And some of us in this room will be contributing towards that technology.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Siddharth, for your time, for your information. I have last question. It is from my side. I have seen in the slides that you mentioned a primary packaging. Primary packaging. Primary means on the strips, or you mean in vials, for example, for a primary product like vials or something like this?
Yes, it's on the strip.
Okay, very good, very good. I think we have another. Okay, we have also a lot of questions from for your session. Look, there is a question generally trying to learn from this group for pharma track and trace in India. Where do you feel the biggest gap in between the manufacturer actually need and what is available systems offer today?
I can confidently say that if you're just talking about the domestic track and trace, for whatever the industry needs, the technology is present. Maybe not 5 years ago, but today, technology is not only present, it's doing a lot more than what the government mandates in terms of analyzing data and actively predicting a lot of other parameters. So I believe that there is no gap. The gap really is between what we have in terms of regulations today to what they actually are around the world, and how we can bridge that gap.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Siddharth, for your time. Thank you for your valuable session. I think we have the next session is Pakistan, but I think Mr. Aftab maybe is not available. I don't see his name in the attendees because he was traveling to Canada. So I think till the next session, we can have, if anyone can have a question from the previous sessions, we can have maybe 2 minutes for questions. If someone have a question, he can raise his hand or put the question in the chat. Okay, Mr. Patrick, you can unmute yourself without without any permission.
The point I would like to what all we've heard so far is there's a lot of focus on the technology, and I agree completely with the last speaker that the technology is available to do almost everything, right? But we should not forget about the processes, right? And what this actually means. A lot of the problems are not. They may show up in technology in our systems, but they're not actually caused by that, right? We will touch on this a bit later on, right? But we should not forget the human factor in all of this, right? The actual doing it on the packaging lines, the processes there, the good practice, all of that stuff. And it's not specific to serialization, of course, but that is a huge factor.
So with that in mind, are you sending up a flare warning of AI?
I'm a huge fan of AI. I think it's great, absolutely, but I think there's a tendency to stick an AI sticker on everything, right? And say AI will solve it, right? And AI is powerful, but we don't need AI for everything. AI is not going to help us with incorrect data, right? It's not going to help us with incorrect processes. It's not going to help us with bad printing. It's not going to help us necessarily with physical aggregation issues. Not going to help us with physical processes in the warehouse and 3PLs, etc. So it has its place. I'm not saying it's not there. It has a place, but it's not the silver bullet that will cure everything.
Absolutely, we agree.
Mr. Haytham, I think you have a question. Yes, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you very much. I'm Haytham Tijani from Sudan. Actually, I just want to comment to Mr. Nathan and Charles, maybe Siddharth also from India. As far as I know,
I think I think Mr. Nathan is leaving, of course, because he have another session. But
okay,
Mr. Charles,
you could answer that question because you are one of the GSA. From my reading, I think the first convening of GS1 was in Addis Ababa back in 2018 or 2017, where there was more than 30 countries have convened, authorities, regulatory authorities and drug supply authorities, as far as I remember. And the next session was in Nigeria. And just comparing our, I am aware of the challenges in Africa, but comparing that with the European experience, you see how long it took time to deploy the system in Africa in comparison to EU. I might just make a comment on this. We have an ongoing project that is the African Medicine Agency, which was the African harmonization. And fortunately, that the African MAA, African Medicine Agency, has been launched since the last 2 years. So my suggestion is that could that be one of the objectives, or we can raise this the matter of GSA deployment to be on the agenda of AMA, and also it could be on the agenda of the AFCTA. Also, it could be on the agenda of Digital Africa. Is that might have hastened the deployment and resolve many challenges? I mean, by saying we need some kind of alignment between all these different projects, because there is so many similarities on this. The other aspect also, looking to India, the last 10 years, the last decade, India has launched what is now globally very watch is the DBI concept, digital public infrastructure concept, which is taking lead in the world nowadays, and the discussions among many developmental parties. And this, is there any way of thinking of making the deployment of GSA taking the same principles of the DBI? That will I think that will fasten the deployment and make it more the standards more standardized and can be deployed by many. Thank you very much. I would love to hear your comments on this.
Right. I could probably talk about what's happening in India. Some of you might be aware that we have something called as the India stack within the fintech space, where all the payments happen, deployed at scale to billions of people. Something like track and trace within the pharma industry would definitely fall under an initiative like that. I'm sure this was discussed among the government bodies, and if ever it is deployed, would be under a digital public initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Siddharth, for the feedback and answering the questions. Mr. Haitham, do you have another question? Okay.
No, thanks. I think I made all my comments.
Okay.
I would. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, Justin, I think we can have like just 2 minutes break, just